So here we have a number line, and we've got 0 and 1, and we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 lines between 0 and 1, so we know that each line is 1/10. Now we need to work out the values of A, B and C. Now A is 2/10 of the way along the line, and we can write that as a decimal because we know that 2/10 is 0.2. The tenths column is the first column after the decimal point. So B is 5/10 of the way along, so 0.5, and C is 9/10 of the way along, so 0.9. So this number line is more confusing because rather than whole numbers, we've got tenths labelled. We've got 0.6, 0.7, 0.8. And between each of those tenths, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 lines from 1/10 to the next. So here we need to work out what number the arrow is pointing to. And because there's 10 lines between each tenth, we need to use the next place value column along. We need to use the hundredths column. So this line is pointing to 0.72 because you have 7/10, and then between tenths we have hundredths, and we're 2 along, so we have 2 in our hundredths column. Now which number is the arrow pointing to now? Well, we have 0.6, and then we have 1, 2, 3, 4 lines, so we have 0.64. And now we have 0.75, and here we have 0.79. Now we've got a different number line, and we've got hundredths labelled, and between each hundredth we have 10 lines. So that means we need to go to the next place value column along. We need to go to the thousandths column. So 0.43 and another tenth of a hundredth. Well, a tenth of a hundredth is a thousandth, so we have 0.431. Here we have 0.423. Here we have 0.435. And here we have 0.438. Now for this number line, we have our whole numbers labelled, but rather than 10 lines between each whole number, we only have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 lines. So each line is 1/5. Now we need to work out how to write 1/5 as a decimal. So we can change fifths into tenths by multiplying by 2. So 1/5 is the same as 2/10. So if it's 1/5 of the way along the number line, it will be 2/10 of the way along, which as a decimal we can write as 0.2. Now which number is the arrow pointing to here? Well, if we know that each line is 0.2, we can count up in steps of 0.2. So 0.2, 0.4, 0.6, 0.8. Now the other way to work this out would be to think, well, the arrow is 4/5 of the way along the number line, or 4/5 of the way along to 1, And 4/5, if we change 4/5 into tenths, it's going to give us 8/10, so 0.8. Now, which number is the arrow pointing to here? Well, we have 1, and then we have 1, 2, 3/5. Now, 3/5, if we change that into tenths, we have 6/10, so we have 1 and 6/10, so we have 1.6. Which number do we have here? Well, we have 2 and then 2/5. 2/5 we can change into tenths. 2/5 is the same as 4/10. So we have 2 and 4/10, so we have 2.4. To make sure we've understood this number line, let's count along in decimal steps. So because there are 5 lines to get from 0 to 1, we know that each of those lines is a fifth, and we know that a fifth is 0.2 because we can make the equivalent fraction of 2/10. So we can count up 0.2, 0.4, 0.6, 0.8, 1, 1.2, 1.4, 1.6, 1.8, 2, 2.2, 2.4, 2.6, 2.8, 3. Now we have a different number line. Again, we've got our whole numbers labelled, but between each whole number, or to get from one whole number to the next, there are 1, 2, 3, 4 lines. So each of these lines is a quarter. Now we can't change quarters into tenths because 10 isn't a multiple of 4. So we have to think the next place value column along after the tenths is the hundredths. And we can change a quarter into hundredths because 4 times 25 is 100. 1 times 25 is 25. So each of these lines represent 25 hundredths or 0.25. So because it's hundredths, we're using 2 decimal places. We're using 2 place values after the decimal point. So here we have 2 and then another quarter. So we have 2.25. So what do we have here? Well, we have 2 quarters, and 2 quarters is equivalent to 50 over 100, and 50 over 100 we can simplify to 5/10, so it is 0.5. Now here we have 3 and 2 quarters. Remember, 2 quarters is the same as 50 over 100, so we have 3 and 50 over 100, which we can simplify to 3 and 5 over 10, so we have 3.5. Which number is the arrow pointing to here? Well, we have 4 and then we have 3 quarters. Now 3 quarters is equivalent to 75 over 100, so we have 4.75. And to make sure we've understood this number line, let's practice counting up in steps. We have 0.25, 0.5, 0.75, 1, 1.25, 1.5, 1.75, 2, 2.25, 2.5, 2.75, 3, 3.25, 3.5, 3.754, 4.25, 4.5, 4.755, 5. Now here we have 0, 5 and 10 labelled, and we've got larger lines and smaller lines. So to get from 0 to 5, there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 larger lines, which means each larger line is one whole. So this arrow is pointing to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, because it's pointing to a larger line, and we know that the larger lines stand for one whole. So which number is the arrow pointing to here? Well, it's pointing to number 2. Now here it gets more difficult because we have 5, 6, 7, but it's pointing halfway between 7 and 8. So it's pointing to 7.5. But we can write a half as a decimal because we can convert a half into tenths. A half is the same as 5/10. So we have 7 and 5/10, so we have 7.5. And which number is the arrow pointing to now? Well, we have 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 and a half, so we have 9 and 5/10, so we have 9.5.